What's going on, fellas? It's your boy Gsluke here with our prize picks preview for round one of the Tour Championship, heading up to East Lake after I record this, so really excited myself. Going to be there on site all weekend, able to give you an idea of exactly the conditions on course. But for this video specifically, going to go over how we expect the golf course to play, both from greens hit, fairways hit, the average score, weather for round one, and then we'll wrap it up with my top 4 picks here for Thursday's round. So by the end, you'll have a good idea of how to create some of your cards and for the picks that I'm using, and just to give you an idea of my exposure. So let's go ahead and start with the golf course, give you an idea of how this is playing, where last year it played a little bit softer. So the scoring average, the fairways hit, same thing with the GIR percentage, were a little bit higher than we're used to seeing because it played so soft. They got over 8 inches of rain there that month, and this time around it's the same type of story. They've had 12 inches of rain this month, and over this week alone they've gotten another 1.5 inches. So expect the course to play soft, the driving accuracy percentage perhaps to be even better this year. Last year they were hit at a 9.1 rate, which is important to remember when we get to the board later on. And then over here with greens and regulation, they were hit at a 67.5% rate, which is important to remember. That is 12.15 greens per round. The scoring average was right around a 68.89, so actually, sorry, 0.81. Got to work on my math there. That's what we're looking at in terms of scoring average. And this is a ball strikers, specifically an approach first type of golf course. If you take a look at the correlations, you can see that shots gained approach is by far the most correlated stat. And it makes sense both from the eye test and the stat perspective. A lot of long irons here, you can see that 200 to 225 yard range is way overutilized. In fact, it's the most common range around this golf course. You have a few 225 to 250 shots, and even, that 125 to 150, which is, the shortest you're going to get around this golf course, is overutilized. So it's a golf course where your second shot matters a lot more than your off the tee play. But if there's one thing that matters off the tee, you can see it's kind of accuracy over distance. Distance actually a little bit less important around East Lake, whereas the distance accuracy stat is actually a little bit more important around East Lake. So that's how you read this type of table. In terms of general stats, off the tee a little bit less important in general. Same thing with around the green and putting. It's mostly an accuracy off the tee type of course combined with, again, that second shot prowess, which is just oh so important. The weather for round one looks kind of like we'd expect. I mean, it's not really a wave advantage to be had because there's only 30 players, which, when you're watching in person is a pretty sweet thing, right? You get to go there, spend 4 or 5 hours at a golf course, then, enjoy the rest of the day with your buddies. And in the morning, low winds, 3 to 5 miles an hour. I don't know exactly when they're teeing off. I think it's like 10:30, 11 a.m., something around there. But by the end of the day, it's still 6 to 7 miles an hour with at most 8 to 10 miles an hour of wind gusts. So it should be relatively optimal conditions, which was the same exact thing that we saw last year. And I can confirm that because I was there in person. Go over to the prize picks board. We're going to look at a few different categories. So let's start with birdie or better, where I think a lot of the board is too high. I mean, at 4.5 for a lot of these players, that's asking a lot. I mean, to get to 5 birdies, that's going to be a tough task. You're going to see a lot of players do so. So if there's somebody I'm taking an over on, right, I want it to be somebody at 4, right? Like a Jordan Spieth, for example, who I project for similar level birdies to the other guys up top. He's a volatile type of player. He's had a ton of success around East Lake. I think that's something that really separates him. Also is Xander Schauffele. But the reason I'm, willing to take an over on Jordan at 4 and rather than Xander at 4.5 is there were a ton of guys that got to 4 birdies last year. In fact, that was one of the most common outcomes. 3 and 4 birdies were by far the most common outcomes there in 2021. And for elite level players, they got to 4 quite often, but they hardly ever got to 5 and 6 birdies. So, for somebody like Jordan, we're obviously hoping for that ceiling performance to get to a 5, but I'd also be okay with a push here, right? Whereas all of the other top end options, you're getting screwed on the hook there. So I would avoid them, to be honest. I probably, would pick and choose spots to maybe even take unders on some of the guys there at 4.5, but I probably wouldn't be taking any overs. So Jordan Spieth, somebody I'm willing to get to with his course history. He struck the ball beautifully last week. I mean, through 60 of his 72 holes, was one of the best players in the field. Just unfortunately, he had quite a few blow-up holes. So that's why he kind of played himself out of contention. But outside of that, the ball game was there. Corey Connors, I'm taking the under on, and there's a few other lower tier players I'd also take the under on. I mean, like a JT Post and Adam Scott, those guys kind of come to mind to me. it's a hard golf course. I mean, the 2 par 5s are, not even birdie holes at that. They're going to be like right around 30 to 40% birdie rates at most. Par 3s are all over 200 yards. They play uphill. They're difficult. And all of the par 4s, I mean, there's a few shorter ones, but they're still not cakewalks. They're well protected. A lot of them, you're still going to have to hit a wedge into a tucked pin location. I mean, this is not a gimme golf course. So the guys at 4, I'd be shading under on, but particularly Corey Connors, who deals with putter issues, right? He's not the best putter. He's going to miss all day from 15 to 20 feet. Might make 1 to 2. He's going to give himself a lot of looks, but for him to get to 5 birdies to screw us, I mean, he's going to have to gain 1, maybe 2 strokes putting, and I'm not really sure Corey Connors is going to do that consistently. So somebody I feel pretty solid about taking the under on there. What we'll do next is go to strokes, which I think is a little bit more unpredictable. Much like birdie or better guys, you'd probably want to fade the guys at the top. There weren't that many 67s or better last year. Remember, this is a par 70, so it is a little bit more obtainable, right, to get to something like a 67, right, rather than it being a par 72 where that's 5 under, but it's still a really hard score to get to considering how difficult this track can be. And I mean, even towards the bottom, a few fades I'd take, right? The scoring average is going to be right around a 68.9. And guys like a JT Poston, I mean, even Corey Connors, for example, are well below average players for the field. So if anything, I'd be taking the over on them. Going over the birdie or better matchup, it's never my favorite board. I will say that there are quite a few on the board that I like. Now, I can't go over every pick that I'm giving out here, right? There's a few birdie or better ones I didn't go over, strokes right there too. They're all on my Patreon page as per usual, but there are actually a few good matchups here for the first round. The unfortunate part is you don't get any sort of multiplier for using them, so I kind of only use them sparingly from time to time if I really like them. So if you want to check those out, they are on the Patreon page. Next up, we've got the green and regulation props where I'm taking the under on Patrick Cantlay. And I'd be taking the under on a lot of the guys, Scotty Scheffler at 13.5, a lot of these elite level guys, just because of the board being too high. Last year, they hit a 12.15 rate. If you remember, right, 67.5% GIR percentage. That's exactly what that equates to. And for Patrick Cantlay, he deals with issues hitting greens, right? He's great at getting up and down, immaculate short game, but he can definitely miss greens in bunches. And last week, I faded him on Sunday, faded him on Saturday in that department. He came through in both days. And you want to pick your spots, right? There's guys that are absolute killers when it comes to GIRs. I mean, like John Rahm, for example, Tony Finau at 12.5. I would certainly not be fading, but there's also a lot of guys on the board that I'd be taking the under on. One guy I took an over on was actually Jordan Spieth. He was at 12 greens of regulation. He's at 12.5 now, which makes it a lot less attractive, but it's a good thing to see that got bumped, right? Obviously, it was a good prop, and Prize Picks felt a need to move it. Let's go over to Fairways Hit, which this is unfortunate, guys, and this is why you kind of got to be a part of the Patreon or just get on these boards early, do your own research and whatnot. Within 30 minutes of the board dropping, this entire board got bumped by 0.5, and a lot of it, I think it has to do with what I put out. I mean, I have a hard time not believing that it does. When I put out a write-up on my Patreon and then 30 minutes later after people hit them, the entire board, every single person here got bumped by 0.5. Last year, the average was 9.1 fairways. Right? We talked about that right off the bat, right? 65% driving accuracy percentage. That's exactly what that equates to. Everyone on the board here was under-projected, especially at the beginning where you had guys at 7.5 on here. You had 8 for somebody like a Matt Fitzpatrick, 8 for somebody like a John Rahm. I absolutely smashed the overs on these boards. I mean, I have almost every single person here over. The unfortunate part is they've all been bumped, right? It's a little bit less advantageous, but I'd still take the over on a lot of them. Again, the average was 9.1. It's still going to be soft. They're getting a ton of rain there this week. So, Scotty at 8. I'd still take the over. Matty Fitz at 8.5. John Rahm at 8.5. A lot of the guys down here at 8, even like a Rory, Cam Smith. I mean, they're not the most accurate drivers in the world, but based on the conditions we're expecting, I definitely think it's more than doable. So I'd still be taking a lot of the overs there. And the last category is hole 18 shots. Probably just something I'm going to avoid. It's a little bit more of a coin flip. It is the last par 5 on the golf course. It's like 580 yards. It doesn't play that long because it's downhill, but and usually you do have your wind at the back too, so I'll say that too. But yeah, it's still kind of a coin flip there. So nothing that I really want to take either direction, but that's the board for you guys. That's the preview for round 1. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared for making your own slips now. Before you're hopping out of here, go ahead and smash that like button. Also, make sure you go ahead and comment down below what your favorite prop on the board is, so we can go ahead and add them to our cards too. And until next time, guys, best of luck with all of your slips. Look forward to all the content for rounds 2 through 4. Again, I'll be on site giving you guys an idea of exactly what I saw, and let's get this cash.